Hi, this is Roger. Frog in my throat. Thanks for dropping by, all in one breath. This has been requested on several occasions, one quite recently, and it's basically the differences between Miltonias and Miltoniopsis. They are quite different plants, even though that name sounds similar. And just to confuse the issue, there are quite a few sellers that will sell you a Miltoniopsis with the tag on it that says Miltonia. Which means if you went by the tag, you would give it totally the wrong care. They come from different parts of the world. They're not the same plant. They're just not, as simple as that. Right, so I've got a couple of each. As we're doing verses, then we better go, you know, red corner, blue corner. Right, first of all, in the Miltoniopsis corner, there are 5 or 6 species, and that's your lot. So all the hybrids and everything have either come as a combination of those species or by sneaking in something else, which means it may not be a true Miltoniopsis. So leave that one there for a bit. Miltonias, there are a lot of species. There are some primary crosses in amongst them, natural hybrids. There's all sorts going on, and there's a lot to choose from, and they vary an awful lot. So that's the sort of main difference. On the Miltoniopsis side, there are very few species to choose from. There's an awful lot of hybrids, but not many species. Miltonias, lots of species, and some primary crosses, and naturally occurring primary crosses as well. So there's a lot of choice, shall we say. However, on the Miltonia side, there are certain species that seem to get incorporated into many of the hybrids. I'm not going to name each one. I'm not going into that. You do your own research if you're looking into these sort of things. But when you get back to differences, let's come back over here into the Miltoniopsis corner. By putting them together, you can see there is a distinct difference in the colour of the leaves. Even though with the Miltonias you can go from quite deep green to very pale green bordering on yellow. But nonetheless it's a proper green. I'll call it a proper green, one way or the other. This, however, is a grey green. Miltoniopsis have a grey-green colour. It's not a natural green. It looks as though somebody's been fiddling with the colours on the camera. So that's that. Right, then we come back to the big difference that's across the board. Let's have a look at the bulb on this Miltoniopsis here. Yeah, it's got leaves coming out the sides. Yeah, let's have a look over here. Let's find a mature bulb over here. Yeah, it's got leaves coming out the sides. But what's it got coming out the top of the bulb? One single leaf. And that's a trait. Miltonias, however, have a pair of leaves coming out the top of the bulb, irrespective of the number of leaves down the side. Yeah? They have a pair of leaves coming out of the top of the bulb, and that's your fundamental difference. Next, I'm not going to do countries and things where they come from, just environments. Country's irrelevant really, it's the environment that's important. These are fundamentally, in the main, apart from one of the species, cloud forest. They're cool growers. Yeah, they're shady, cool growers with an awful lot of humidity around them, with some airflow, gentle airflow. Now that's in the wild, yeah? Don't forget, when you start getting lots of hybridization going on, the traits can change. They're less dependent on that high humidity, the more complex the hybrids can become. And if you take somebody like the Mathers Foundation, they are working hard to hybridize Miltoniopsis because they've lost their popularity, because they're not so easy to grow. And what they're doing is they're starting to rebreed hybrids with the goal of making them a lot easier and more tolerant. So that's their goal. It could take donkey's years to achieve that. Well, we've got yappy dogs off again. Let's all have to listen to it. So anyway, Miltoniopsis are endearingly known as the pansy orchids because their blooms open flat, quite like a pansy. They can be pretty large, they can be relatively delicate and small, so they do vary considerably. So cooler growers, bottom end of intermediate into cool as far as your temperature ranges are concerned. They like a reasonable difference between day and night. They like pretty good humidity, and they don't like bright light. They like reasonable light. They come from cloud forests, so if they haven't got the leaf cover above them, they're shrouded in cloud and mist and often rain, you know, so that's their environment. Miltonias, the environment varies considerably, given that there is a wide range of species, and they do come from different environments. They can come from quite low down to reasonably high up. So you get a variety of temperature ranges. You get some that are up the high end of intermediate, bordering on warm. And you get some at the bottom end of intermediate, bordering on cool. Very few go down into the cool, very few go up into the warm. So generally you could say these are intermediate growers. They don't mind some heat, they'll put up with it, providing the humidity's up there with it. If you haven't got the high heat, they don't need such high humidity, nowhere near the level that these need. The other thing that you'll find with the Miltonias, they're not so keen on having a fan blowing on them. They tend to dehydrate, yeah, because they're relatively vigorous growers. So, you know, they need to be able to get that moisture up into the plant and not lose it straight away by having it blasted with a fan. So, reasonable to good light, and you can vary the light on these and see the effect it has on your plant in your environment, because they'll tolerate a range of light levels. Now, if you've got a plant that stays a deep green and still blooms okay for you, then that's one of those that doesn't need the high light requirement. However, if you've got one that's a deep green and just won't bloom, then you need more light, and you need to push them. So you get to the point where the leaves start to pale in the light, and then stop, and then give it some time and see if it'll bloom. But sometimes you have to push the light level to get Miltonias to bloom. Not so much with the Miltoniopsis. If they've got the right conditions and they can mature the bulbs and not go downhill and lose all their roots, which they're prone to doing, then they should bloom naturally. There's no special arrangements for those to bloom. However, with some of the Miltonias there is. They will need the higher light. And go steady blasting them with fans, they're just not too keen on that. Okay, so that's just a quick sort of difference between the two. This is what I would call a typical Miltonia. I mean, it's a hybrid. I don't know what's in it. I could look it up. But that's a typical shape and a typical patterning. Yeah? Often they've got nice veining on the lip. It's often got purple on it, not always. And an awful lot of them have got these tiger stripes to one degree or another. Some of them are broad bands that almost turn into a block of colour, and some of them are distinct stripes, lovely tiger stripes. But they do tend to be that type of colour, a yellowish background with a sort of orangey red, autumny colour, stripy thing going on. But then there are others that are just shades of purple. So there's quite a lot of variety. Within the species of the Miltoniopsis, they are mainly pinks and pale. There is a variety of one that is yellow, and it's rare, but it's a naturally occurring variety of that particular species. So, and that yellow from that variety of that species has been incorporated in an awful lot to get different colours going on it. Yeah, so yeah, so that's it really. Bit warmer, bit brighter, can be vigorous. When they're actively growing and pushing on those new growths, they're drinkers. Yeah, these don't change much. They don't like to be soggy. They like to have a fresh, buoyant media with some air in it that stays moist but not soggy. And it needs to be fresh and buoyant, because these will lose their roots very easily. So if you start to get stale media and it starts to compact and the air's starting to get it, you're going to lose your roots. And they can be quite difficult to get going again once they go down like that. They're very prone to all the types of stress. Too warm, stress. Media not right, stress. Too much airflow, stress. Light too high, stress. And they'll just about tolerate any one of those. Give them 2 or more and you're probably slowly but surely losing your plant. They are what I call fussy. But in amongst the hybrids you can get some real vigorous growers that stonk away. I mean, this is just a no ID hybrid. I mean, that's just produced 4 or 5 new growths, all of which bloomed. So it's just finished blooming and it's at it again. The new growths are coming up already. Yeah, so this is quite a vigorous hybrid. But it won't stay like that if this media starts to go stale, because as it starts to go stale it'll hold moisture too long and it'll shut the air out, and there goes your roots. They'll rot as easy as anything. So that's those. These are less fussy. Again, they like some air around their roots, but they're less fussy. That's the easy thing. They're just less fussy. These need some moisture retention, so with a relatively small plant like some of the species, seedling bark on its own will be fine, or perhaps with a bit of charcoal. Otherwise, some sort of small to medium bark. Some people add moss, some people grow them in moss, but go careful. If that moss starts to go off and turns acidic, you'll lose your roots, so you've got to keep your eye on it. They are best repotted, the same as virtually all orchids, when new roots are growing. It doesn't matter, about the time of year is irrelevant. Catch them when those new roots are pushing out, and then if you do lose some of the old roots, you've still got something to replace them coming on behind. You're far less likely to lose the whole plant that way. Not much else to say, but as I said, the main physical difference between the two is the silvery greyish green leaf colour and the single leaf out the top of the mature bulbs, compared with the shades of normal green and a pair of leaves coming out the top of the bulb. So that's that. Miltonias are constantly being introduced and used into generics. You'll get the milt bit, you know, on the intergeneric name. Miltoniopsis less so. They are in some intergenerics, but far less so. They tend to be hybridized amongst themselves. But you do occasionally get a Miltoniopsis crossed with another member of the Oncidium Alliance, basically. All this is Oncidium Alliance. Even though neither of these are called Oncidiums, they're still in the Alliance. They have a look about them, something like that. So there we go, basic differences, temperature ranges, light levels, preferences for their environmental conditions, and easy to get hold of. Many hybrids, some vigorous growers, and the species are relatively easy to get hold of as well, and there's a lot of them. Species, difficult to get hold of. Lots of hybrids, some are excellent, some are even vigorous. But the care on these needs to be more precise. Whereas these are pretty easy going, quite honestly, quite tolerant. So there we go, Miltonias versus Miltoniopsis. If I had to have a room full without a lot of struggling and worry, then I'd have Miltonias. But I like the challenge of Miltoniopsis. and I like the blooms. I like the delicacy. Sometimes the colours are brash and bold with big splash patterns in the hybrids. The species tend to be a bit more delicate. Not so much with Miltonias. Some of the species are actually bold and brash. I mean, this is a hybrid, but it's very, very close to the species. The only real difference is that the petals and sepals are a bit wider on this one, so it has got something else mixed in it. So there we go, chat about Miltonias, Oncidium alliance, pretty easy going, and Miltoniopsis, Oncidium alliance, not so easy going. But if you've got an environment where you grow Miltoniopsis and they grow well for you, then great, get more in. But it's a bit of trickery. Some people just grow them well, and obviously something's just right and it works. And other people, they just keep dying. They lose them left, right and centre. I've lost a lot over my time. So there we go, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.